For 12 long years, my world was a place without color. Every morning I woke up and the weight of another day pressed against my chest like a stone. Some people say time heals everything, but I learned that time can also become a prison, one that keeps you chained to your pain, to your past. My name is Daniel Hayes, and before the darkness, I was just an ordinary guy. I had dreams, simple ones. I wanted to be a teacher, maybe write a book someday, fall in love, and grow old with someone who made me laugh. But all of that ended on a rainy evening in late October, 12 years ago. I was 24 when the accident happened. It was supposed to be just another drive, nothing unusual. My younger brother Michael and I had been coming back from a concert he'd begged me to take him to. He was 17, full of life and laughter, always pulling me out of my shell. I can still hear the sound of his voice singing off key to the radio, windows down, wind rushing in. That sound haunted me for years. The truck came out of nowhere. One moment we were laughing, the next everything turned black. I woke up in a hospital bed, confused and in pain. But the worst part wasn't the injuries or the tubes. It was the silence. No laughter, no singing, just a nurse with tired eyes telling me Michael hadn't made it. Something broke in me that day. I never went back to teaching. I never wrote that book. I barely left my apartment. I cut off everyone, family, friends, anyone who reminded me of what I'd lost. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want comfort. I wanted to disappear. Over time, people stopped calling. My parents tried in the beginning, but grief changes everyone. We all drifted into our own islands of sorrow, unreachable to one another. I stopped answering their messages. Eventually, they stopped sending them. The world outside kept moving, but I didn't. I existed in that tiny apartment like a ghost. My days were routine. Wake up, avoid mirrors, ignore the world, sleep. Sometimes I'd sit in the dark for hours, listening to the hum of the refrigerator or the sound of distant traffic. Noise was easier than silence, but nothing ever filled the void. I told myself this was how it had to be, that I didn't deserve anything more. Then, on an unremarkable Tuesday afternoon, something strange happened. My mailbox, which I rarely checked, was stuffed with flyers and junk. I pulled them out with little interest, about to toss everything when a pale blue envelope caught my eye. No return address, just my name, handwritten in neat, unfamiliar cursive. I stared at it for a long time before finally opening it. Inside was a simple card, no decoration, just one line written in that same steady hand. Even the darkest night will end, and the sun will rise. Victor Hugo. There was no signature, no explanation. I scoffed at first. Some kind of charity thing, I thought, but something about the words stuck with me. They whispered to a part of me I'd long buried. The next week, another envelope arrived. This time the quote read, "You are not broken, you are healing." Week after week, the letters came, always handwritten, always anonymous. Each message was different. Sometimes a quote, sometimes a question. Sometimes just a reminder that I wasn't alone. I tried to ignore them at first, but I couldn't stop reading. They became the only thing I looked forward to. A small light, growing quietly in the corners of my life. I didn't know it yet, but those letters were the first cracks in the walls I'd built. And the person behind them, the woman I hadn't yet met, was about to change everything I thought I knew about darkness and about love. The letters continued every Tuesday, without fail. At first, I thought it might be some counselor from a local group, someone trying to help anonymously, but there was something deeply personal about them, about the way they knew what to say without saying too much. Each letter felt tailored, like whoever was writing them saw right through the walls I'd spent years constructing. I didn't respond. I didn't know how, but every Tuesday, I checked the mailbox like it was a ritual. Sometimes I'd sit with the letter for hours before opening it, reading slowly, rereading, letting the words wash over me like a tide that was soft, but persistent. One week, the message read, "Grief is not a weakness. It's proof that you loved deeply." Another simply said, "When was the last time you laughed?" The letters didn't ask for anything. They just showed up. That quiet presence became something I depended on. But it wasn't until the 12th letter that I realized things were beginning to change. It was a dreary February afternoon. The sky was colorless, the air biting. I pulled the envelope from my mailbox like always. Pale blue, familiar handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. This one said, "I hope one day you write back. Even if it's just to say hello, I'll keep hoping." I froze. It wasn't just a quote or a message anymore. It was an invitation. 2 days later, I caught myself staring at it longer than usual. I hadn't looked at anything with that much attention in years. Then, everything changed. It was March 3rd. A date that would be burned into my memory forever. I was walking back from the corner store, hoodie up, eyes down, when I heard a voice behind me. "Daniel?" I turned, startled. No one ever called my name anymore. A woman stood a few feet away. She had a soft expression, like someone who had rehearsed this moment but wasn't sure how it would go. Her coat was dusted with snowflakes, and her gloved hands were fidgeting nervously. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, noticing my confusion. I wasn't sure it was you." I narrowed my eyes. "Do I know you?" "No," she said gently, "but I know of you." That should have made me angry. It should have made me walk away. But something about her voice, the tremble, the honesty, held me in place. She reached into her bag and pulled out a familiar pale blue envelope. "I thought maybe it was time we met," she said. My heart stopped. "You've been sending the letters?" She nodded. "I didn't want to scare you," she added quickly. "But I've been where you are. Not exactly, but close. I lost my brother, too. His name was Eli." Her voice broke on his name, and I felt something twist inside me. "I work at the library," she continued, wiping her eyes. "A few months ago, I found this old donation record. Your name, a book you gave in your brother's memory. I don't know why, but it stayed with me. I saw the date, and I wanted to let you know that someone remembered." She paused, searching my face. "I never expected you to write back. I just hoped the words might help." I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. Her name was Leah. And in that moment, under the gray sky and falling snow, I felt something I hadn't felt in over a decade. Connection. Hope. Like maybe, just maybe, the darkness wasn't permanent. After that day in the snow, everything began to shift. Leah didn't push her way into my life. She didn't expect anything from me. But she gave me something I didn't even know I needed: gentle, steady presence. She never asked me to talk about the accident. She never pried. She just showed up. She started leaving small notes in my mailbox again. Not every Tuesday now, sometimes on Fridays, sometimes on rainy Wednesdays. But this time they came with little things tucked inside. A tea bag she said helped with anxiety. A photo of a book quote she liked. Once a tiny envelope with a single seashell and a note that said, "Still here." Sometimes I replied. Just a few words, scribbled on the back of her own letters. My hands would shake every time I dropped them into her slot at the library front desk, but I kept doing it. She always answered. One Friday, she left a card that said, "Would you like to meet for coffee? No pressure. Just daylight and company." I stared at the question for a long time. Daylight and company. The two things I'd avoided the most. But that Saturday, I found myself standing outside a little cafe on Main Street, hands in my pockets, heart pounding like I was about to face a firing squad. Leah was already there. She smiled when she saw me. Soft, unassuming, like we'd known each other for years. We sat in a quiet corner. I couldn't meet her eyes at first. The noise of the place felt too loud, the light too sharp. But Leah didn't fill the silence with chatter. She let it settle, like it was part of the conversation. Eventually, she asked, "Do you want to talk about your brother?" I shook my head slowly. She nodded, like she understood perfectly. "I don't talk about mine much either," she said. "But sometimes I write him letters." I looked up. That surprised me. "I never send them," she continued. I feel like if I write to him, I can keep him close. It's silly, maybe." "It's not silly," I said quietly. That was the first real conversation we had, and from there, something tentative began to grow. We met for coffee every Saturday after that. At first, we didn't talk about anything deep. Books, the weather, a movie we both remembered from childhood. It felt strange to laugh again, like stretching a muscle that hadn't moved in years. Leah had this way of smiling, not just with her mouth, but with her whole being. Like she genuinely felt joy in small things. I watched her sometimes and wondered how someone who had known such loss could still carry so much light. One afternoon, after we left the cafe, she said, "You should come to the library sometime." I raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "There's a reading room in the back with this huge old window. The light is nice, and the world feels quiet in there. I don't read much anymore, I said. That's okay, she replied. Just come sit, breathe. So I did. The next Monday, I walked into the library for the first time in years. She wasn't at the desk, but a sticky note was waiting with a little arrow pointing toward the back. The room was exactly as she described. Warm light filtered through tall windows. Dust floated in the sunbeams like golden snow. There were no computers, no buzzing lights, just shelves and silence. I sat. I didn't read. I didn't write. I just existed. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like enough. From then on, it became my new ritual. Coffee on Saturdays, the reading room on Mondays. Slowly, quietly, I began to build something that resembled a life. Leah and I never defined what we were to each other. There were no labels, just consistency, just kindness. One evening, after we watched a community theater play, something Leah insisted we try, she turned to me and said, "Do you ever feel guilty when you're happy?" I looked at her, startled. "All the time," I admitted. She nodded slowly. I used to think moving forward meant forgetting him, but now, I think it means honoring him by living fully. I swallowed hard. I don't know how to do that. "You're doing it," she said, reaching for my hand. I looked at our hands on the armrest of the theater seat, hers warm and certain, mine trembling slightly. Something inside me softened. Maybe healing didn't mean erasing the pain. Maybe it meant carrying it with grace, finding people who could sit with you in it, without needing to fix it. Leah was that person. And bit by bit, the darkness began to lift. Just when I thought I was finding a new rhythm in life, the past decided it wasn't done with me yet. It began with a letter. Not from Leah. This one had no handwriting, no warmth. Just a printed envelope addressed to me, an official-looking document that made my stomach turn before I even opened it. It was from the Department of Transportation. They were closing the investigation into the crash that had taken my brother's life. "Final review enclosed," it read in bold typeface. I hadn't thought about that part in years. I had buried it, buried everything, because digging meant feeling. And feeling back then was unbearable. I opened it with trembling hands. The letter detailed the accident, the timing, and a new conclusion reached after a witness had finally come forward. A truck driver who hadn't been interviewed initially. His statement confirmed something I never knew. The brakes on the other driver's car had failed. It wasn't reckless driving. It wasn't speeding. It wasn't avoidable. It was mechanical failure. A freak accident. 12 years of self-blame, of replaying the scene in my head, imagining all the ways I could have done something different, stopped him, been there, and suddenly it was meaningless. There was nothing I could have done. I felt like I couldn't breathe. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't go to the library. I didn't text Leah. I just sat in my apartment, staring at the floor like it might explain something. The truth hadn't freed me. It crushed me. Because if I wasn't to blame, then what had all the pain been for? I canceled our Saturday coffee. Leah messaged me twice, then once more the next day. "I hope you're okay. I'm here if you need anything." But I didn't answer. I stopped going to the reading room. I stopped replying to letters. A familiar voice returned to my head, the one that whispered I didn't deserve healing, that maybe I was never meant for light. Grief is strange like that. Just when you think you've climbed out of its hole, it pulls you back in from a different angle. Leah didn't force her way back in, but she didn't disappear either. 2 weeks after my silence, I found a book outside my door. It was a worn copy of The Little Prince, a story my brother used to read to me when I was little. Inside, a note in Leah's handwriting. "For when you're ready to come home to yourself." I held the book in my hands for a long time. I couldn't read it yet, but I didn't throw it away. Days passed. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and saw the jar on the windowsill, the one that had once held the yellow flower Leah sent. It was empty now, dusty, forgotten. I rinsed it out. not because I was ready for flowers again, but because I realized I had let everything good turn still. I needed air. I needed Leah. That Saturday, I stood outside the cafe again. She wasn't there. I waited. Half an hour passed. I was about to leave when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "I didn't think you'd come." She was bundled in her scarf, cheeks pink from the cold, eyes full of questions and concern. "I almost didn't," I said, my voice hoarse. We stood there, neither sure what to say. "I got a letter," I finally said, "about the accident." She nodded, waiting. It wasn't anyone's fault, not his, not mine. A long silence stretched between us. "I spent so many years thinking it was my fault," I added, my throat tightening. "Thinking I should have stopped him, called him, done something." "And now?" she asked gently. "Now I don't know who I am without that guilt." Her eyes softened with understanding. "You're allowed to rebuild," she said. "You're allowed to feel the loss and still let the light in." "I'm scared," I admitted. "I know," she whispered. "But I'm here." We didn't go inside the cafe. Instead, we walked, slowly, silently, through the park near the library. The trees were bare, but the sun was out, casting long shadows across the path. It was quiet, but not empty. Eventually, I turned to her and said, "I want to tell you about my brother." She smiled. "I'd love that." And so I did. I told her about the time we stayed up all night building a blanket fort that collapsed 3 times but finally held, about the way he laughed at his own jokes before he could finish them, about the last words he said to me, "I'll be back before dinner." Leah didn't say much. She just listened. That night, I opened The Little Prince and read until the last page. I cried. And then, I slept. The kind of sleep that feels like peace. For the first time in years, I started to wake up with something more than dread in my chest. It wasn't joy, not yet. But it was curiosity. A gentle wondering about what the day might bring instead of what it might take away. Leah and I kept meeting. Not always at the cafe. Sometimes we'd just walk. Sometimes we'd sit on library steps, drinking tea from paper cups. She never pushed, never pried. She simply made space for me to breathe. And in that space, something inside me began to unfold. One afternoon, I returned to the small desk in the back corner of the library, the one I used to hide behind. I carried a new notebook. The pages were stiff and empty, but they didn't scare me like they used to. I began to write. At first, it was messy, broken phrases, scribbled thoughts, half-remembered dreams. But little by little, stories began to form. Not about grief, but about hope. Stories where broken people found each other, where the lost were seen, where healing took time but arrived anyway. Leah read every page I showed her. She cried more than once. "You write like someone who's learning to love the world again," she said one day. "Maybe I am," I replied. The truth was, I had changed. Slowly, quietly, but unmistakably. I no longer avoided mirrors. I didn't walk with my head down. I started to call my parents again, brief conversations, hesitant at first, but warmer each time. But healing isn't a straight line, and transformation, no matter how honest, invites doubt. It came one night in early spring. A storm had rolled in, rain against the windows, wind tugging at the shutters. Leah was supposed to come over to read. I had baked banana bread and lit a candle, feeling proud for creating something that felt like comfort. Then she called. "I'm so sorry," her voice crackled through the phone. "My mom had a fall. I'm driving up to see her. I don't know when I'll be back." My heart dropped. Oh God, is she okay? She will be, I think. It's just, I need to be with her. It's sudden, and I don't want to leave like this. "Don't apologize. Of course you should go," I said, trying to steady my voice. "I'll keep in touch, I promise." But after the call ended, I stared at the empty table. 2 mugs, Banana bread untouched. The flickering candle suddenly felt too bright for such quiet. She was gone. And just like that, the fear returned. What if she didn't come back? What if the only person who ever truly saw me disappeared like everyone else? I hated how fast the darkness crept in, how quickly the room felt like the past. But this time, I didn't let it swallow me. I picked up the notebook and wrote, not a story, just a letter, to her. I wrote about the storm, about the empty chair, about how afraid I was to be alone again, but how I understood, how grateful I was for her presence in my life, how her kindness had cracked something open in me I didn't think could heal. I didn't send it, but writing it gave me strength. A few days later, I received a message. It was a photo. Leah's hand holding her mother's, both of them smiling in hospital gowns. Underneath, she had typed, "We're okay, and I miss you." I cried again. Not because I was broken, but because I was still learning to be whole. In the weeks that followed, I didn't retreat. I visited a grief support group Leah once told me about. I read at open mic nights. I donated books to the library and joined a community garden. For the first time since the accident, I felt tethered to the world again. Then one morning, as spring bloomed around me, Leah came back. I found her waiting at our cafe, a tulip tucked behind her ear. I didn't rush to her. I walked slowly, savoring the moment. "I brought you something," she said as we sat. She handed me a small envelope. Inside was a printed flyer. Local writing contest. Theme, second chances. "Deadline's in a week," she said. "I thought of you." My hands trembled slightly as I held it. "I don't know if I'm ready," I whispered. "You are," she said. "You've been writing your second chance all along." That night, I opened my notebook, and I began to write the story of the boy who lived in darkness for 12 years, and the girl who reminded him how to see. I never thought a story could feel like a confession. But as I sat at my desk that week, typing my submission for the contest Leah had shown me, it felt like I was peeling back every scar I had learned to hide. Every sentence pulled something buried from the shadows and held it to the light. The story wasn't a perfect metaphor. It didn't need to be. It was about a boy who lost his brother in a fire, about how guilt became his shelter, how years passed and he stopped looking outside, and how one day, a stranger knocked on his door, not to rescue him, but to sit with him in the dark. Writing it broke something in me, but in the best possible way. I wrote it in one sitting, tears streaking down my face, hands trembling. When it was done, I didn't reread it. I just hit send. Then, I waited. It was only a small local contest, but to me, it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. In the days that followed, Leah and I continued our quiet routine. She knew I had submitted the piece, but never pressed. We met under trees just beginning to bloom, walked past kids playing in the park, and let the silence between us be soft, not strained. One morning, as I poured us coffee at the cafe, I received an email. "Congratulations. Your story, The Boy Who Forgot the Sun, has been chosen as the winner of the Second Chances contest." I just stared at the screen. Leah noticed my pause. "Everything okay?" I turned it toward her. She read it, blinked, and then covered her mouth. "Oh my God." I laughed, awkwardly, breathlessly, still unsure if I was allowed to feel proud of something. But Leah stood up, reached across the table, and hugged me. "You did it," she whispered. "You let the world see your light." The prize wasn't money. It was something deeper. They wanted me to read the story at a small community gathering. The thought terrified me. Me, on a stage, sharing that story. But Leah squeezed my hand. "You don't have to be fearless, just honest." The night of the reading, I nearly backed out. The venue was a modest hall, strung with paper lanterns and folding chairs. Local artists displayed paintings on easels. A woman with a cello played softly in the corner. When they called my name, the world narrowed to the paper in my hands and the sound of my own breath. I walked up, heart pounding, and stood behind the microphone. I looked out and saw Leah. Her smile didn't waver. Her eyes didn't judge. So I opened my mouth and spoke. The first lines were shaky. My voice trembled, but as the words came, something shifted. I wasn't just reading a story. I was reclaiming a part of myself I thought had died with my brother. I saw nods in the audience, wet eyes, people gripping the hands of the ones they loved. By the final paragraph, the silence was so complete it felt sacred. I read the last line. And when he finally stepped into the light, he wasn't alone anymore. I looked up. The audience stood. Applause filled the hall. Not loud and chaotic, but warm, thunderous with meaning. I stepped off stage, my legs weak. Leah met me halfway, tears streaming down her face. "You gave us your heart," she said, "and it's beautiful." I couldn't reply. I just hugged her, and for the first time in over a decade, I didn't feel hollow inside. After the reading, people approached me. Strangers shared their own losses, siblings, parents, partners. One woman said, "Your story helped me cry for the first time in years." I wasn't alone. None of us were. It was more than a reading. It was a bridge between past and present, grief and growth, silence and song. And somewhere in that crowd, I saw someone I hadn't expected. My parents. They stood near the back. My mother's hand was over her heart. My father, who had aged since I last saw him, wiped his eyes. We didn't speak that night, but we exchanged a glance that said, "Soon. We'll talk soon." That was enough. After the hall emptied, I and Leah walked outside. The air was cool and sweet with spring. "You were incredible," she said. "I've never seen anyone open their soul like that." "I think I had to," I whispered. "For me to move forward, I had to finally let go of hiding." She nodded. We sat under a street lamp, quiet for a while. "I need to tell you something," she said softly. I turned to her. "There's a reason I noticed you that day in the cafe," she began. "I recognized the silence. I've lived in it too." She told me about her own loss. Her twin brother, lost to depression. The way she shut down after, how she wandered through the world for years, aching and unseen, until someone helped her find purpose again. "I didn't help you out of pity," she said. "I helped you because I saw the spark I thought I'd lost in myself." We cried together, two people once broken, now healing. That night, as I walked home, the sky opened above me. Stars like scattered hope. The air smelled of lilacs and something else. Something like peace. The darkness still lived inside me. But now, so did light. Spring came in full bloom the week after the reading. Trees exploded with blossoms. Birds returned. The sun felt warmer, kinder. It was like the world had waited for me to be ready before opening up. And I was ready now. I met with my parents the following Sunday. We chose a small cafe, neutral ground. I arrived early, hands fidgeting around a coffee cup, breath caught between fear and hope. They entered quietly. My mother was the first to smile, a hesitant thing, like a memory she wasn't sure she was allowed to hold. My father's shoulders sagged, not from age, but from all the years we lost between us. "Hi," I said. "Hi," my mother echoed, sitting across from me. No one rushed. No one pushed. We just sat, three people surrounded by unspoken things. Then my dad cleared his throat. "We read your story. Twice." I nodded, heart thumping. "It was beautiful," my mom whispered. "Painful, but beautiful." We didn't try to summarize the years. We didn't explain away the mistakes. We just talked. About my brother, about the silence that swallowed us whole, about the nights we spent aching in different rooms, not knowing how to reach each other. It wasn't closure, it was opening. At one point, my mom touched my hand. "We missed you so much, sweetheart. We didn't know how to bring you back." "You just did," I whispered. We cried. Not the shattering kind from 12 years ago, but the healing kind, the kind that washes wounds instead of reopening them. In the weeks that followed, I began writing again, not just as therapy, but as expression. Leah helped me submit stories to small journals and blogs. Some were accepted, others weren't. But it didn't matter. I wasn't writing to be seen anymore. I was writing because I had something to say. Leah and I grew closer too. What started as friendship deepened into something steady and warm. It wasn't some movie moment of instant love. It was slower, real. The kind of connection built on shared silence and mutual respect. One night she said, "Do you ever think about what your life might have looked like if none of the pain had happened?" I thought about that, then shook my head. "I used to," I said, "but I don't anymore, because if that pain hadn't happened, I wouldn't have found my way here. I wouldn't have found me." We started a small writing group together, others who had stories inside them but were afraid to let them out. Survivors, dreamers, people in quiet battles. It became a sanctuary. And one afternoon during one of our sessions, a boy, barely 17, thin, eyes heavy with loss, read a poem about his sister who'd died of cancer. His voice cracked. His hands trembled. When he finished, he looked around the room like he expected to be laughed at. But no one did. Someone clapped. Then another. I smiled, because I knew that look. That feeling of not being alone anymore. After the session, he came up to me. "Your story. The boy who forgot the sun." That was the first thing I read that made me think I might still be alive inside. I swallowed hard. "Thank you," he said. I thought about my brother then, about how I'd carried his absence like a lead weight, how I thought grief had to be silent, invisible, but here was this boy, still raw with grief, choosing voice instead of silence. That was the moment I realized something. My story hadn't just saved me. It was saving others, too. That night, Leah and I walked through the park, the path lit with golden lamps. Laughter echoed from a nearby playground. The world felt alive. "Do you still feel like you live in darkness?" she asked gently. I looked up at the moon, glowing soft above us. "No," I said. "Not anymore. The darkness is still there, but so is the light. And I think, maybe, they belong together." We stopped at a bench. I took her hand. "For 12 years I thought I was broken, that I wasn't meant to come back from it all," I said. "But you didn't fix me, Leah. You just reminded me I wasn't beyond reaching." She didn't speak. She just leaned in and kissed my forehead. That's what we do for each other. I used to mark my life by the fire that took my brother. Now, I mark it by the moments that followed, the ones that shaped me, hurt me, and healed me. I will never stop missing him. But I'm no longer trapped in that night. I found my way forward, not by forgetting the past, but by learning to carry it differently. In the final paragraph of my newest story, the one that came after all the others, I wrote, "He didn't need the sun to remember who he was. He just needed someone to sit beside him in the dark and remind him that the morning always comes."